Welcome to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger, and I'm joined today by Adam Levitan of Establish the Run. And this is actually very cool for me because Adam was my first guest this summer on Press Coverage, and we've been rolling, every week. During the summer, we had a couple times with multiple guests, but it's very cool to have Adam back on. If you follow fantasy football, if you're active in, fantasy Twitter, reading articles, you're definitely following Adam Levitan. You guys have built like a behemoth over at Establish the Run. A lot of respect for what you guys have put together. We've had a lot of, Establish the Run content creators on our podcast, and they helped us out with the draft kit. So big respect to you. But here at Press Coverage, we're trying to find the sharp takes, the actionable information, and we're trying to identify edges that can help us in fantasy. And I think you're a great guest to kind of get us started in this big week 6. So welcome back to Press Coverage. Adam, how are you doing today?
Hey, yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you guys are churning out a lot of content this time of year. I know you yourself are recording multiple podcasts a week. Why don't you let everybody know kind of where they can find your work, what you're dropping, like what's your weekly schedule looking like content-wise these days?
Yeah, honestly, I would suggest people who have not heard of us or checked us out, just check out our YouTube channel. It's just Establish the Run is the YouTube channel. It's totally free. We put a ton of content on there, and then also the podcast feed. We put most of the podcast onto YouTube, but some of them are also only on the audio feed there. So yeah, if you check out the Establish the Run podcast, that's totally free. Establish the Run on YouTube is totally free. You get a sense for what we're about and how we kind of think about fantasy and DFS and all that.
Yeah, so definitely a bunch of sharp people over at ETR. And one thing that you recently podcasted about, Adam, that I think is interesting was your new Sims product. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and how fantasy managers can use that?
Yeah. We could talk for hours about this, I think,
Wikipedia version.
Version. It basically, if you can accurately project through very, very, very complicated and advanced math and algorithms how players interact with each other in each game, and you simulate those games over and over and over again, you can get a full distribution of the player's outcome. Whereas in the past, we only had a guy's mean. We did not have his median. We did not have his true 80th percentile outcome. And through a sim, you can do all of that. And so we have spent the last 6 months and an incredible amount of money, which makes me very uncomfortable. But anyways, we've also spent an incredible amount of money developing the Sims. And original idea was just to have this for us. We can make our projections better. We can make our content better. Everything will be better. But there has been such a demand for this front facing in the DFS space, combining that player sim, correlated player sim with a DFS contest sim. You're able to see what your simulated ROI is in a contest. And this is we could talk for hours about this. I think for most people, it's a turnoff and they probably shouldn't be using it. But if you're serious about DFS, and eventually I think this will come to the season-long streets, won't be as valuable there, but we have used some of the sim stuff for season-long start-sit decisions in FFPC main event. Our opponent has Luke Musgrave. We're down by 12. We have 2 guys on the Raiders. Who should we be starting out of those 2 guys? Run it through the sim, and you get an idea of what you should do right when it's really close. So it's very complicated. I think most people listening to this probably never want to hear about this. I've already turned them off. But in the next 2, 5, 10 years, I think even in the season-long streets, you'll be hearing about Sims.
Yeah, I know it's very cool. It's very cutting edge. And I do think there's a lot of correlation between DFS and, like you said, just making sharp lineup decisions and also kind of knowing what you're dealing with. I think this sort of product can help you identify a ceiling outcome versus a floor outcome. And I think a lot of times it comes down to what I need out of this position. Maybe a 11 points out of one guy would help me, or maybe I need to lean into unpredictability. And if a guy might have a 5-pointer or he might have a 22-pointer. And I think this sort of tool can definitely help you out. So hat tip to you guys for putting that together. One question that I've been asking everybody that's come on Press Coverage and also people that have been come on First Class Fantasy is you put a great deal of time and effort and energy into your guys' rankings during the summer, into ADP targets. And then we get hit with all this information in the early season. Now we're through 5 weeks of NFL. What player kind of besides Puka Nacua is your biggest like pleasant surprise? Maybe a guy you weren't on this summer or a guy that you didn't quite see having this sort of seasonal outcome.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a lot of them. Although, a lot of the best players have been first round picks. I mean, McCaffrey, Tyreek, Diggs have all been really good. I would say that probably the biggest whiff right now for me, which don't even feel that bad about. I would say, I probably did like 80 drafts. I think I took maybe once or twice DJ Moore.
Yeah.
Maybe once or twice. And it's painful because I took a ton of DJ Moore a ton of times through the years in Carolina because I thought DJ Moore is a really good player. And I liked his spot a bunch of times in Carolina. So it's been really frustrating to see him just completely go off these last couple of weeks. I would just say that these last couple of weeks have been against Denver and Washington. And I'm not ready to sit here and say that Justin Fields is going to continue to be able to get the ball to DJ Moore. By the way, in that Commanders game, like DJ Moore just kept running the same route over and over again. The Commanders never adjusted, never tried to double cover, never tried to do anything to DJ Moore other than just let him go nuts on them. So, I didn't take any DJ Moore. It doesn't look great right now. I'm not ready to sit here and say that it's like the worst thing ever, though, that I don't have DJ Moore. I'm still a little bearish. Maybe I'm being stubborn there.
Yeah, it's actually it was very polarizing this summer. And I actually heard a pod with you guys where it was Silva taking the pro DJ Moore,
Yes,
and my friend Mike Leone giving the reasons not to take him. So I think through 5 weeks, big hat tip to Evan Silva on that. Even though
yes.
Leone, he runs pure on any other decisions this summer, but that was definitely cool to kind of go back and think about the takes and reasons this happened. And I'll say, DJ Moore, we can't expect a 40 burger or 50 burger every week, but Minnesota, Vegas, both coming into Chicago, and then that road game against the LA Chargers, they have a chance to kind of keep it going. Your thoughts on Justin Fields, who's played so well the last 2 weeks after having some struggles early in the year?
I think that he's going to turn back into a pumpkin when he's not facing Denver and the Commanders. However, like you said, the schedule coming up is really soft. I do think for fantasy, though, I'm not for real life. Like the guy who's capable of throwing for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, who's also capable of running for 100 yards in a game, as we saw so many times last year, and just this week, 57 yards. I mean, I was telling people to buy Justin Fields in fantasy, to not cut. I mean, I got so many questions before these last 2 weeks. Can I cut Justin Fields? You can't cut guys like this. It's just too valuable in fantasy. My more concern on Justin Fields is, can he sustain as an accurate, effective thrower for DJ Moore? And that's a whole other story from fantasy.
Yeah, and I think that as long as he has some slight tunnel vision for DJ Moore, you could keep up the production. How about a big disappointment for you, a guy that maybe you were bullish on that hasn't been doing it, or just a guy that you had higher expectations for and has been very disappointed either in the usage the team is giving them or their overall production?
Yeah, I mean, the production stuff, it's clear. I mean, I was taking Tony Pollard, as high as 8th, I think was the highest that I took him. And I was taking him a ton when he got like 12th or 13th in any half PPR setting. I was taking Tony Pollard there, and I was taking a ton of CeeDee Lamb also. I think that I am not worried whatsoever. They have had the weirdest games. I mean, that first game, they got all defensive touchdowns. They win 40-0. I mean, no chance for CeeDee Lamb. The Jets game, they won 30-10. Obviously, a tough matchup for CeeDee. Dusted. Patriots game, they won 38-3. 49ers game, they got completely whitewashed. Let's just have them in like a normal game. And like starting this week at Chargers, to me, is like a great spot to get Pollard and CeeDee Lamb going. So those are 2 guys that I'm high on that. Yeah, teams don't look great with those guys right now, but I'm not too worried about either of them. Chargers, Rams, Eagles, Giants, Panthers, Commanders, Seahawks, Eagles are their next games for the Cowboys.
Yeah, no, I like hearing your bullish takes on Dallas because like Pollard steamed up in those high stakes drafts. He was steaming up big time in September, and Lamb, of course, was like a lock inside the top 15. So we're going to talk about a number of other players and hear about some of the ETR changes in their top 150 after we hear a word from our sponsors.
This episode brought to you by Mojo. Mojo is that player stock market. We love Mojo because we like making lifetime bets on players. You run out the clock on these guys. Mojo just rolled out a brand new fantasy platform. That's right. So now you can build a portfolio of player props. Oh, Jamar Chase, over 77.5. Oh, Kadarius Toney, under 15.5. Whatever the under is on Kadarius Toney, doesn't matter. You can just stack up the props in your portfolio. And the beauty is, once the Sunday games kick off, it's not over. It's not over until it's over with Mojo, because once those games kick off, you can then move in and out of positions. Let's say that you're well ahead of expectations. You can cash out. Let's say you're behind expectations. You're underwater. Well, you can double down. That's what makes Mojo so special, why they're different. Check it out. Go to the App Store, get the Mojo app, and use the promo code UNDERWORLD. The promo code UNDERWORLD gets you a 100% deposit match up to $100. So the promo code is UNDERWORLD, and they will match your deposit dollar for dollar. Go to Mojo, start building your portfolio, and then during the games, you can be a fantasy day trader. Woo.
Welcome back to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger, joined by Adam Levitan of Establish the Run. And Adam, it's Wednesday, so if you're in a FFPC or NFFC league, you're grinding waivers. This is like the big waiver wire week with all these injuries, and then next week we have bye Mageddon with 6 teams on bye. Who are some of the players that you are adding or you recommended this week? And it's specifically, what do you think about this situation in Arizona? James Conner goes down, Amari DiMercato, Keontae Ingram sitting on a lot of waiver wires. Is this a situation that you're interested in?
I think so. I mean, I'm hearing, in my opinion, way too much Keontae Ingram hype. I mean, I think Keontae Ingram can't play at all. I mean, he's been so bad in every opportunity he's had in the NFL. And yeah, I get that DiMercato was an undrafted, was not invited to the combine, but he's played pretty well. I mean, just anyone with 2 eyes can see it. So I think DiMercato will play on all the pass downs and have a pretty decent share of the base work. And that's a really good role in today's NFL. We've seen Arizona be able to move the football against defenses like Dallas and San Francisco, which honestly really surprised me. So yeah, I'm interested in DiMercato for sure. I think a sneakier one would be Deontay Foreman. I understand Rashawn Johnson's owned in every league. Deontay Foreman, I understand he's been a healthy scratch the last 4 weeks. He was really effective for Carolina. I mean, really effective. Bears gave him a decent amount of money. Would not shock me if Roshan actually steps into some version of the Herbert role and Roshan stays in his role. I'm not saying that's the likeliest scenario, but I don't think that's the craziest thing to think that Foreman can come in and take a ton of base work right away in that Bears backfield. So yeah, those were 2 that I think are worth bidding on, and Foreman should not be expensive in my opinion. And then yeah, the KJ Osborne stuff, I assume KJ Osborne's probably owned in most FFPC type leagues, but I'm just not that excited about a guy, wide receiver. You need to be very good to win. It's not like the running back position where you can just be a guy. And I think KJ Osborne's kind of just a guy.
Yeah, no, he definitely had some weeks last year, but I do think it's going to be difficult. Like putting him into your lineup might be like a hashtag better and best ball type guy. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think he's going to actually go for a lot in the leagues he's available in.
Definitely.
Which also makes it a little bit of tougher to lean into. You talked about the Washington-Chicago game. 2 guys who've kind of slipped through the cracks in a number of leagues in terms of waiver wire are Curtis Samuel and Logan Thomas. I see those guys available in several of my leagues still, despite Curtis Samuel having a big week last week. I think people kind of maybe brush that a little bit to the side, but he's had back-to-back weeks with 18 points per game in PPR. And then Logan Thomas had a really, really good game against Chicago. Again, very soft defense, but your thoughts on these 2 guys moving forward?
I think Curtis Samuel's like a good, decent NFL player. What I did not expect was that there was going to be no emphasis from Washington whatsoever to funnel the ball to their best players in Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. First read looks, not there. Overall target share, not there. I mean, the highest target share on this team is Terry McLaurin at 16%. I mean, that's really, really low for a number 1 wide receiver. And so what you've seen is that the targets, and by the way, there's a ton of targets to go around because this team leads the entire NFL in pass rate over expectation right now. And so you get a ton of targets to tight ends and running backs and wide receiver 3s and wide receiver 4s. So yeah, I think that's kind of the way that they want to play it. Logan Thomas, any tight end who's running as many routes as Logan Thomas is and has some juice, even at 32, Logan Thomas has some juice, is definitely worth adding. Like, definitely. I just dropped in a league. I think I dropped Hunter Henry for Logan Thomas in one league. And I loved Hunter Henry before the year. The Patriot situation is so bad. I'm going to get so many more attempts from Sam Howell than I think I will from Mac Jones most weeks. So I made that move. Curtis Samuel 1 is really hard, I think, to click as a start, but in maybe a bloated bye week, you could get away with it, depending on the matchup, I think.
Is there any under the radar waiver wire guys that you think might slip through the cracks, that people might, get something out of for very cheap? And I'll throw out two guys that are actually on the injured reserve now that are slightly interesting. You bring up how bad that Patriots offense is. Any hope for Tyquan Thornton just having manufactured touches? And any hope for Keaton Mitchell, who's still out there in, some leagues, even though he was kind of a red hot name last week, but he's still on the IR with a chance maybe to get some opportunity in Baltimore.
I have been stashing, just because I had an IR spot in some of these leagues and I didn't have anyone to use it on, so I've been stashing Keaton Mitchell. I'm not optimistic about it because Justice Hill and Gus Edwards, I think, are fine, and the coaches have some level of trust in them. But yeah, in a deep league, I'd be stashing Keaton Mitchell. Tyquan Thornton, they need speed so bad. I mean, so bad. So it makes sense on paper. When the offseason first started, I thought Tyquan Thornton would actually win the number 2 job. And so I was drafting him in best ball some. It became very clear that he was getting outplayed at camp by guys like Devontae Parker and Juju Smith-Schuster and Demario Douglas. And that is a major red flag for me on Tyquan Thornton. So I'm not that into him. If you wanted to go super deep, Trey Palmer. I haven't heard anything about Mike Evans' hamstring. Anytime Mike Evans misses, though, I think Trey Palmer is at least worth mentioning. This one's going to make people sick, but if anyone can get something out of Chase Claypool, maybe it's Mike McDaniel. And like pieces of this offense I want to have. And so I was pretty aggressive on Jeff Wilson coming back. And yeah, Chase Claypool is someone, if I had like a 20 spot bench or whatever, I would consider at least bidding $0 on Claypool and putting him on my bench and hope that Mike McDaniel can find something there.
Just convert him to tight end, right,
Yeah.
Adam? Like fulfill the dream.
Easy game, right? I mean, Durham Smythe, they have him running a ton of routes. I guarantee you Chase Claypool could do better at the routes than Smythe could.
Yeah, 100%. And I love the Trey Palmer call. It's funny, if I say wide receiver from Nebraska, Trey Palmer, people are like, whatever. But if I say, LSU wide receiver, Trey Palmer, where he was before Nebraska, people start getting a little bit hyped when you hear about that 4.33 speed coming out of LSU. Yeah. So, yeah, Trey Palmer's got 2 touchdowns already. And, like you said, Mike Evans with that hamstring kind of issue, I think he'll be back, but these things can flare up again. So definitely a big week for waivers. Again, a ton of bye weeks, a ton of injuries. This is like the week to kind of sift through everything and make sure you're all set. Let's stay with Minnesota. You bring up KJ Osborne. You're not too bullish there. How about the increased opportunities for Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson? How do you see this thing playing out?
Yeah. Well, Hawkinson, first of all, I mean, I thought Hawkinson had like the best chance to beat Travis Kelce this year before the year, not because, he's some like superstar like Travis Kelce is, but because out of all the tight ends, he had a legit chance to lead tight ends in targets. Like he can get more targets than even Travis Kelce can on a week-to-week basis. Now you remove Justin Jefferson from that. I mean, my God, we're not finished with projections yet for this week, but I bet that we have TJ Hawkinson around like 9 targets in a game, which is absurd for a tight end. And so, I mean, that's really hard to overcome for other tight ends, that kind of volume from reasonable quarterback play. Addison, I don't think his actual position is going to change. In other words, they'll leave KJ Osborne in that Justin Jefferson role and leave Jordan Addison in his role. But just, I think Jordan Addison will be better at earning targets than KJ Osborne will. The guy that I'm most concerned about on Minnesota, who I think is a sell, is Alexander Mattison. Saw him start to get some work eaten up by Cam Akers this past week. But just when you don't have Justin Jefferson, you're just in the red zone less, and touchdowns have been important to Alexander Mattison. Cam Akers, someone else could start playing on pass downs more, and they're going to be behind more without Justin Jefferson. It doesn't feel right without Justin Jefferson on Alexander Mattison for me. So that would be the big sell that I would have on Minnesota.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I saw you tweeting about the increased use for Akers. There's definitely gonna be opportunities for other players to have some sort of touches, and they definitely could change slight philosophy. Justin Jefferson is just such a huge loss. I think it brings the offense down considerably as well. How about Kirk Cousins? He becomes kind of a difficult player to kind of project because the volume will be there, but you have to move him down big time in the rankings. Is that how you're seeing it as well?
I mean, yeah, we have Kirk Cousins all the way down to 142nd overall right now. We docked him 48 spots in the rest of the season, top 150. When you don't run, and Kirk Cousins obviously doesn't run, you need insane efficiency to compete with these guys who run and throw. Insane efficiency. And when you don't have Justin Jefferson, your efficiency can take a huge hit. So, I'd probably rather have Matthew Stafford right now than Kirk Cousins. Matthew Stafford has Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell. It's like, it's not great for Kirk Cousins, I would say.
Yeah, and the game flow is going to be a little bit better for LA. Like you said, I think that they get rid of Van Jefferson and then they have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. The consolidated targets are going to those guys, and you're kind of asking KJ Osborne to fill in that top role. So, yeah, I'm trying to stay away from Kirk Cousins as much as possible, and it felt like found money for the first few weeks with his production. So, big disappointment. This is a kind of an interesting question, but what is more disappointing in fantasy football? Injuries are always tough to deal with, but is it harder to deal with like losing the Justin Jefferson, the guy you used the high draft capital on, or is it more difficult when you have a potential league winner like Achane, where you feel like you had the nuts because you drafted this guy in the 10th, 11th, 12th round, and in some home leagues you picked him up off the waiver wire, and now it's like just deflating to see him out of your lineup. What do you think is harder for people to take?
I think the Justin Jefferson one is harder to take because it's just random, right? Like, I didn't ask for the 1.1. I just got it. If I had gotten any other pick, I wouldn't have even had Justin Jefferson. On the Achane thing, it's all part of the game. You have a great move, you pick someone up, or you draft someone that turns into a star. And I feel like you had more control over that. And therefore it wouldn't tilt me as bad as like, God, if I had just gotten the 1.03, I would have had Christian McCaffrey or you know what I mean? It's just so random. So yeah, that's so frustrating for people who have Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, it's so tilting, and it's like the James Conner injury doesn't even resonate. Like nobody's even talking about it because of these huge impactful ones. And just a general question, do you prefer your leagues where it's a Tuesday night waivers, like a traditional home, or do you like the Wednesday night waivers? I think it's a little bit polarizing. I'm a huge proponent for Wednesday night waivers.
I mean, Wednesday clearly makes more sense. You have more information. It's just my entire life I've always played in like these Yahoo leagues with my friends, and it's always the default is Tuesday night. So I have people who do the FFPC and the high stakes waivers for us. So it doesn't bother me either way now, but I'm so used to Tuesday. What would be the argument for Tuesday over Wednesday though? I don't really see it.
Tradition. I don't know. There's no good argument for having less information. It's kind of archaic, but there's always people that are used to one thing and don't want to give it up. So shout out to anyone with a home league with the opportunity to set it up for Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Listen to Adam Levitan. Listen to everybody. One player that we were really, really excited about last week in terms of the increased usage and also the big time production, incredible production from Breece Hall. Do you think we're back here? His production last week was more than he had in the previous 3 weeks. Broke off the big run, also caught a couple of passes. It's nothing but more kind of better vibes from the Jets the last 2 weeks offensively. How confident can we be in Breece Hall moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not the performance of Breece Hall, which I think was expected. The production on a per play basis was expected when you play the Denver Broncos. I thought the big change was Dalvin Cook. They realized sucks. I mean, and it was going to take them time, I think, to realize that. It takes everybody. Every time there's a running back out there, a veteran running back that was once really good, everybody wants to pile into this guy. I mean, it just never makes it rarely, if ever, works out. And I think the Jets are finally seeing that now. Dalvin Cook only played 10 snaps in this game. Breece Hall set his season high by a mile, 71% of the running back opportunities. And so I see no reason that will change. What I'm concerned about changing for Breece Hall is that when you're not playing Denver, Zach Wilson can look really, really, really bad and totally torpedo this offense. Michael Carter's still playing on pass downs, which is a concern. Not great either. But yeah, things are looking up for Breece. Zach Wilson's been better, but he's going to have some floor games too because Zach is just going to face plant from time to time.
Big time tilting game for a lot of Breece Hall managers this week against Philadelphia. That's going to be a game that's kind of like, hey, where we're at, because this is going to be a real defense with guys who can affect the game and a chance for Zach Wilson to kind of go back to old Zach Wilson. So definitely a fun one this week. How about the Miami backfield, Adam? We had the loss of Achane. Raheem Mostert has played very well. Obviously, he takes the next step up. But what are your thoughts on Jeff Wilson? This is a guy that I was very, very high on in my waiver wire column. I think that this could be a real opportunity for him. He had 9 weeks last year of RB2 or better performance, and now an opportunity. Do you see these things this way?
So I think the worst case scenario for Jeff Wilson is that they see him as Raheem Mostert's direct backup and Salvon Ahmed or Chris Brooks is Devon Achane direct's backup, if that makes sense. That is not how they've played in the past, though. So I don't not think that is likely. I think that Kyle Shanahan, going back to the San Francisco days when Mike McDaniel was there, like Jeff Wilson, Mike McDaniel brings him to Miami in Jeff Wilson. And so I thought he played pretty well last year. It was not that big a difference between him and Mostert. Mostert's obviously way, way, way faster and more explosive. So yeah, I think we'll likely have Ahmed or Brooks for some work in this game, assuming Jeff Wilson's activated. But most of the work will go to Mostert and Jeff Wilson. And, you know, I'm not going to overthink this. Like, anyone getting touches in this offense is going to be very productive. So, you know, I don't think people need to worry about how effective Jeff Wilson will be.
And how would you, if you're in a league with, let's say, Foreman, DiMercato, and Jeff Wilson, are you going Jeff Wilson ahead of those guys, or are you going with the potential for a greater opportunity in a lesser offense with the Foreman and DiMercatos?
I think that I would have Wilson 1, DiMercato 2, and then a tier drop down to Foreman 3rd.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Wilson, pretty easy one for me. Like you said, you want guys in that offense. You know, they got it figured out over in Miami. How about Jalen Waddle, Adam? This has been a kind of a slow start for him. Any concerns there, or do you see him turning it around and providing us those smash games that we're used to getting some week winning performances from Jalen Waddle for the first 2 years in his career, and kind of just waiting around this year?
Yeah, disappointing. I was taking Jalen Waddle a ton. I would say when he got to me at like 23, 22 overall, something like that, I was taking Jalen Waddle there almost every time. So yeah, I'm frustrated for sure. I thought last week was the best usage for Jalen Waddle all year. Actually saw more targets than Tyreek Hill. Had 1 touchdown, had another touchdown called back by penalty. I believe Jalen Waddle actually led all wide receivers last week in expected fantasy points. So I think it's coming for Jalen Waddle. Obviously, he's going to get overshadowed by Tyreek Hill. Like, when Tyreek Hill scores 80-yard touchdowns, and Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane score 80-yard touchdowns, you don't get enough plays off. You don't get enough chances off, you know? And so these guys being extremely efficient is worse for everyone else, obviously. So, yeah, I'd be willing to trade for Jalen Waddle, though. Like, I'm not worried. I don't see a huge difference from last year to this year in Jalen Waddle.
Derrick Henry sitting around at running back 15 on the year, but it's been weird scoring. He's had like 2 very good weeks and then 3 weeks kind of nothing. And he's also been outsnapped by Tyjae Spears in multiple weeks. This past week, he actually, the touches were 16-11 in Henry's favor, but it's a little closer than Derrick Henry managers would want to see.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on kind of this backfield moving forward?
I think this was the scariest game for Derrick Henry so far, because you could explain away some of these other games where Tyjae Spears played a ton by, hey, they were winning by a ton or they were losing by a ton. This game was close throughout between the Titans and the Colts. And like you said, Tyjae Spears still was right there with Derrick Henry in usage. In the past, these are games that Derrick Henry would have gotten 25, 30 touches in a game. And I guess they just don't think that they want to do that anymore. And by the way, Spears is playing really, really well, despite all the ACL, no ACL stuff. Like, he looks really, really good. So I have major concerns on Derrick Henry right now. When they play well, when the Titans play well and they win games by like 10, 20 points, Derrick Henry's still going to have big games. But yeah, I think I'd rather have Breece Hall, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, maybe Mostert than Derrick Henry right now. And yeah, hopefully you guys had a fade on him before the year.
Yeah, it's not Jalen Warren, Najee Harris level, but it's kind of like this could be the next one where we get a few more weeks into the season, and this is the next like Pollard, Zeke, Warren, Harris, Eckler, Gordon type situation where it's like we want more touches for the dynamic younger back who can catch the ball. So yeah, it's definitely tilting for Derrick Henry managers. I don't really have any Derrick Henry, but it's definitely a lot of people were taking him, especially at the end of the summer. So, tough one to watch, guys. Tough one to watch. You guys do a great job with continually changing your top 150, and then you'll podcast about it and do, change logs and all that. It's very easy to take in. Why don't you talk about a couple players that really rose up? And I'll start out. Two guys that I saw really rise up your rankings were Jamar Chase and Brandon Ayuk. Your thoughts on these guys, just how good they look and the roles they have in their offenses?
Well, yeah, I mean, we probably shouldn't have brought Jamar Chase down, right? But we brought him down due to concerns that Joe Burrow's calf thing was so bad that this has to be baked into Jamar Chase. I think Joe Burrow put a lot of those questions about his calf to bed. Against Arizona, he had like a 10-yard run. He pushed off his back leg and threw the ball really far there. I think it was the first play of the second half or something like that. And so, yeah, after seeing that, we had to put Jamar Chase back up. Yeah, it was our fault for bringing him down, I guess is the point on Jamar Chase and the Joe Burrow stuff when we shouldn't have. On Brandon Ayuk, I mean, dude is just awesome.
So good.
So much of a better route runner than Deebo Samuel, and I think that he vibes with Brock Purdy a little bit better than Deebo Samuel does. That goes back to last year, too, with a lot of the first look stuff, and a lot of the usage stuff has been Ayuk over Deebo. And so, yeah, they're just playing at such a high level right now. I feel pretty good. Feel pretty good about that one. The other guy that we moved up a ton, I mentioned Breece. I mentioned David Montgomery. DeAndre Swift is one that we moved up 16 spots. They've completely decided they're not going to use Rashad Penny and Boston Scott. And they've decided that DeAndre Swift's going to be their feature back. I mean, DeAndre Swift for 20 touches a game. All I've ever wanted throughout DeAndre Swift's career is 20 touches a game. Finally gets it in Philly. Like, we have him. Where do we have him? We have him 36th overall. Before the end of the year, it would not shock me if DeAndre Swift is into the 20s. Like, this is a really good role on an incredible offense. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, and you watch the way he plays, and it's kind of like, why did Detroit make this move?
Yeah.
If they're going to draft Gibbs and not use him, they could have just kept Swift. So, yeah, he looks fantastic. One other, you mentioned let's talk about DeVonta Smith and Chris Olave just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because their production has not really been there. And those were guys that steamed up big time during the summer. Certainly DeVonta Smith earned it last year, top 8 wide receiver season in Philly. Chris Olave was more of the summer riser, the new opportunity guy. Your thoughts on these guys and their production moving forward?
I like to close my eyes and just bet on talent at wide receiver. And I think these guys are awesome, awesome, awesome talents. Like what Chris Olave did as a rookie, not many guys do. And so like trending towards year 2, I think it's still awesome for Chris Olave. The concerns right now are Derek Carr's shoulder, whatever toe thing is going on with Olave. It doesn't seem like it's major, but whatever. And maybe a bigger concern, Michael Thomas playing well and seeing a lot of targets. And Alvin Kamara coming back and seeing a ton of targets. Only 3 this past week, but 14 the week before. And that stuff is obviously not great for Chris Olave. I still think I want to have Chris Olave on my team. I'm not saying I'd go out and break the bank for him. We have him down to 28th overall in the rankings, but if somebody's selling low on Chris Olave, I'd be a buyer. DeVonta Smith stuff I looked at this week, usage, role, where he's getting the ball, everything looks the same as last year. The difference is that he's lost 5 percentage points in target share to A.J. Brown, and that's a ton. I mean, he's down to 20%. A.J. Brown's up at 26% or something like that. a lot of stuff is first look to A.J. Brown and not DeVonta Smith. I'm not saying that's going to continue. Last year, we saw they were almost dead even in target share for the entire year. A.J. Brown, though, I think is probably a better player. And so maybe it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense that they're going more to A.J. Brown now. So I have a little bit of concern on DeVonta Smith, but as we saw with Goddard was awful for the first 4 weeks. They decided to get him going in this game. It was clear. I mean, they were first reading to Dallas Goedert a ton, and Goddard went off. So maybe they'll do that with DeVonta Smith coming up.
Yeah, it's definitely tilting, especially with a new offensive coordinator, when you see, the alpha wide receiver being used more heavily. The secondary wide receiver takes a step back. So, yeah, DeVonta Smith's definitely pivoting. I mean, definitely tilting. And I love your take about Dallas Goedert because it seemed like it was like a squeaky wheel gets the grease. There was a lot of criticism in the Philadelphia media about Goddard not having yak opportunities, and they went to him like right away. It was the first drive was a Dallas Goedert drive. You had to love it.
He had like 4 catches on the first drive, and who's to say the next week they don't decide DeVonta Smith should have 4 catches on the first drive,
Yeah, no, 100%. One wide receiver that I think could be rising up your top 150 if we talked a month from now, I think Christian Watson is heading back to maybe having some big games. They have the bye week this week. What are your thoughts about Watson and just, some of the positives that you're starting to see there?
Yeah, I mean, he had a good role this past week. I don't think the opportunity is going to be a question. He's their number 1 wide receiver. He tied for the team league with 7 targets in that game. His ADOT was 26 yards down the field. Average depth of target for Christian Watson, 26 yards down the field in that game. When you have an ADOT like that, when you have an inconsistent quarterback in Jordan Love, who's aggressive but inconsistent, you're going to have some huge games. And if not for the horse collar tackle, it would have been a huge game for Christian Watson. But you're also going to have some really bad games. So people are going to get frustrated, I think, with Christian Watson. I don't think it's going to be a very balanced kind of trajectory for Christian Watson here. He's going to have some huge games and some bad games. I think we need to try to stay even with it. We have him 47th overall right now. That strikes me as a really good ranking no matter what happens this week. Even if he catches 2 balls for 24 yards, I still wouldn't want to drop him because I think next week 4 catches for 150 and 2 touchdowns is well within the range.
Yeah, I think he's the kind of guy that you just leave in your lineup and you set it and forget it, especially in points league. It's like you cannot overthink Christian Watson. The boom weeks will come. And it's one of the most tilting things ever when you have Watson on a Monday Night Football game and he gets the horse collar tackle to take away those points from you. It was a tough sight to see. Do you have any hope for Jackson Smith and Jigba and maybe a little more usage for Quentin Johnston? Both of these guys are first-round wide receivers that have disappointed in the early season, especially JSN, who steamed up big time in redraft. But they both had their bye week, and a lot of times we see some self-scouting during bye weeks where guys' roles can change. Hope for role changes, maybe some increased usage for either of these guys?
I mean, we have Quentin Johnston ahead of JSN by a couple rounds right now, and I feel pretty good about that because Seahawks are, I believe, 26th in 3 wide receiver personnel. And yeah, you could say maybe they'll change that. That would be wish casting to me. I don't think that they're going to change that even as the offensive line gets healthier. So yeah, I mean, when you only playing 3 wide receiver sets, but your team doesn't run very many 3 wide receiver sets, and when you're out there, you're competing for targets with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and your average depth of target is like 2 yards for JSN. It's just really, really hard. Now, I want to keep JSN on my team because if something were to happen to DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett, I think JSN would go off. So I'm trying to keep JSN on my team. I don't want to start him right now. Quentin Johnston, he's competing for targets with some very good players like Austin Eckler will be back, and Keenan Allen is obviously playing at a really high level. But if he can beat out Josh Palmer for that number 2 role, I don't think that's crazy at all. And I don't think it's crazy to think that coming out of the bye, you can start scheming stuff to get Quentin Johnston on the move. He's so good in yak type stuff. So yeah, I like having Quentin Johnston. I'd be okay even starting Quentin Johnston if I had to. JSN is more of a bench staff for me.
Yeah, for me, it's both of these guys. It's very tilting when you come out of the bye week. I want to see something different. And like you said, it's the Quentin Johnston one I think is almost more tilting because the role should be there. They have a big game. You got the Kellen Moore Bowl, like you've alluded to. So why don't we talk about that? Give us a game that you're excited about this weekend, the game that you're most excited about on the NFL slate this weekend, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kellen Moore Bowl is super interesting. I don't know why exactly Dallas got rid of Kellen Moore, but they did. And I think Kellen Moore's done a pretty good job so far with the Chargers, whereas the Cowboys have been so up and down, and people are calling for Dak's head and everything. And yeah, it hasn't been pretty. So I think it's a really interesting game. I think it'll be a high, despite Dallas's defense, I think it'll be a really high scoring game too. Like, I think that Kellen Moore will have them ready to put up points on this Dallas defense. So yeah, I believe that's an island game too, maybe Monday night or something like that.
I'm excited for the Bucks, 3-1 Bucks coming out of a bye, hosting Detroit. Baker Mayfield having this like out of nowhere production. That game really excites me a lot. And then I'm interested in Cincinnati, Seattle, with Seattle coming off of their bye week. You know, we saw Cincinnati, like you talked about, Joe Burrow looked a lot better. It's like a big tilting game because Cincinnati's 2-3, but now the division is kind of there for them with, Baltimore dropped to 3-2, and it's definitely an interesting one. Adam, this was awesome again. Thanks for coming back on. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find your work once again and what you have coming out next?
Yeah. If you're serious about fantasy, you should be on Twitter at Adam Levitan, all one word. And like I said, if you're watching this on YouTube, just check out the Establish the Run channel on YouTube. If you're listening on iTunes or whatever, check out the Establish the Run iTunes feed, podcast feed, and those are all free.
Awesome. Well, tune in tomorrow on Thursday at 3:30. First Class Fantasy, John Daigle of 4for4 will be joining us. And then stick with us at press coverage all season long. Got a lot of awesome guests lined up. We're going to do our best to help you win a lot of money and win some titles this season. Have a great day.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.